I want to talk briefly about the difference between believing and knowing. Belief versus knowledge. Rudolf Steiner has said in several of his lectures and books, be it The Knowledge of Higher Worlds, or even more specifically, the appendix to the Philosophy of Freedom, that there are two paths. One path is that of the outer world. The outer world is of belief. Seeing is believing. Being told things can be a form of believing, but it's this outside influence, be it our education, our upbringing, our social influences, economic status, political ideologies, algorithms that provide the substance of belief. That's all outer. It's all superficial. Versus the faith that comes from this inner knowledge that, of course, we might explain as genetics or in other sciences, but kind of dismissing the fact that it's not just from our parents and grandparents. It's ancestral, and if you trace it back far enough, it goes to a one, and that's absolutely cosmic. So we have the tendency to believe the outer world, which insists that we learn discernment from bullshit, from the things that we think serve us and the things that actually do serve us. Now, the thing that is, I think, more essential is that knowing. But again, how does one discern this outside from the inside? And it might be easy to say as well, the inner knowing typically comes from something that maybe you haven't learned on the outside. Well, it's easier said than done to even acknowledge, because we forget. I have forgotten more than I'll ever know. I'm quite certain of it. But here's an example of discernment that I just experienced probably a month ago, and I keep reliving as I'm teaching in the classroom. About a month ago, I had this class and I was teaching linear equations. I'm not a mathematician by any stretch of the imagination, but that was the class that had to be taught during the curriculum. And so I'm going over linear equations, and pretty much all the students have understood it but one. Now, I need to say that I myself had to become reacquainted with linear equations, having not used them since high school. And so it was my 16-year-old son, who's in high school, who taught them to me, or retaught them to me. And I could feel that learning come into me. And so here I have the majority of the students understand linear equations except this one, so I have to change the ways in which I'm communicating in order to articulate the how-to, the methods of the linear equations. And when it gets to that point, when she finally understands, it's like this incredible epiphany. It's like this aha moment, right? And I recognize something. I recognize learning. It's not necessarily what we're learning, but it's learning in and of itself. So I stopped the class right there, and I said, there's something careful to note. And I looked at the student who just understood the concept. And I said, there's two things that are happening. One of two things is happening, probably a combination of both. But there is you applying some form of mathematical logic where this puzzle makes sense. And mathematics would just be us creating these puzzles and the rules of which we understand the pieces to complete it. But there's something else that's happening. Belief. You are believing what I am saying and trusting it to be true. Now, that anecdote right there doesn't necessarily work because it's mathematical, right? We have mathematics that is probably more of an absolute in any field of study. So it might work best if I were to use, say, history or social sciences, and I'm the teacher and I'm providing some information. When a student is learning, one of those two things is happening. They're applying some form of logic to have it make sense to themselves, or they are completely trusting the source from what the information is coming from for whatever reason. And that source could be completely wrong. So what I told the students when they recognized the moment of learning is to absolutely hold with them a healthy skepticism in order to really discern truth from non-truth, truth from capital T truth, a capital T truth that is only within ourselves and definitely not on the outside due to so many different factors, be it our human faculties that are absolutely limited, or the fact that anything that is observed changes due to it being observed. So I just thought that was an amazing instance that really suggests to me that if that discernment were to take place, then perhaps it would be the outside world that would change and not be changing us. If we were to use discernment and this inner knowing, we would recognize that the outer shouldn't be dictating as much as we allow it to. And so it's not about necessarily trying to gain freedom and sovereignty by way of the outside world, but rather gaining that sovereignty on the inside through freedom of one's mind. Or it could be full of shit.